Welcome back to CSE Metrics Mania. Today we are diving into what exactly the CSE slider is. And if you're anything like probably most people, you're thinking slider, slider, slider. Maybe you're getting a little bit hungry. So you think of American terms. It's like a little mini hamburger, maybe a tiny sandwich. That's not our CSE slider. However, we probably like to eat those for lunch around here. I also start dreaming of being on a beach and wearing some nice sandals, some slider sandals with the CSE brand on them. Also not what we're talking about today. Also not talking about the baseball pitch of slider. Maureen Kirchner is back on with us to give us some insight into what the CSE slider is. Welcome, Mo.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, so we're super excited to learn more. As a little teaser, if you just look behind me on the wall, right up there, there's our slider, the CSE slider. Now, this is a big deal. It is the foundation of where our data and analytics lands into a visual representation so that youth athletes who are participating in our evaluations can truly understand how they performed, and as it lays up to the collegiate level, it's all landing in a slider there. And so Maureen's going to give us some insight into what it means and how it's displayed. So first, give us just an inside scoop into how the slider is laid out and what it means to the player.
Sure. So at CSE, we are all about helping the athlete find their fit, right? Find where in college they would be best suited to play. And so we wanted to visually show the player what that answer meant, as opposed to just giving them a number and kids and parents saying, what does this number mean? This isn't helpful. So instead, we correlate that number to a spot on the slider. So as Jessie was saying right behind her, that is our CSE slider. And so it's basically a stack of all the different divisions that you could possibly play in college. So starting up at the top, the Power 5 D1 schools, and then you have the mid-major D1s, and then we have a section for the D2 schools, D3, and then over on the left, we have JUCO 1 kind of crossing and overlapping all the way through there. Then we have NAIA kind of out to the side, and then we go down to the JUCO 2s, JUCO 3s, and at the very bottom, there's a section for not ready if the player actually isn't ready to play in college at that point in time. And so we were very, very intentional when we built this slider, how the overlapping happens between divisions, because we all know once you get to like the very bottom of one division and the top of another, those schools are very competitive with each other. And so sometimes it's not necessarily about the division, the level of play at the school, but it's a lot of other things that our visionary Dave King likes to call his 5-fit test. Things like location of the school, things like how much it costs, things like the type of academics that they have there. And then athletics is just, a piece of that puzzle. And so we know that a lot of those, again, schools right in between those boundaries can be very similar, very competitive to each other on those overlapping boundaries. And so that's why we built the slider that way. It was very intentional. And so, again, it's basically just a visual representation to the player and to the parents on where the kid could play in college based upon how they performed at our evaluation.
Love the visual. It's definitely a good takeaway for our players. And as you said, it's almost a conversational starter for what levels these players can play at in terms of a low D1, a high D2. That player could see a very different collegiate career at one or the other in terms of, are they riding the bench at a low D1, or maybe they're a big impact player at a high D2. And then to that note, at the bottom of the scale where it's saying not ready, we have to remember we're also testing 14-year-olds. Like, just because they're not ready and comparing to the collegiate levels at that age doesn't mean that they don't have a ton of time to improve and grow on the scale. So it's definitely a nod to development for the players as well, because what you score at 14 is possible. It's going to look different than what you score at 16, 17.
Absolutely. So that's a really good point, Jesse. When a player comes and takes a CSE evaluation, we are evaluating them on that day where they could play today. And so we're not projecting, in 5 years they could play D1, let's say. It's could they play D1 today? And the reason why we have that philosophy at CSE is because when you project a kid, there's a lot of assumptions built into that, right? Are they going to stay healthy? Are they going to continue to work as hard as they have in the past and maintain that same trajectory, right? There's too many assumptions to build into something like that. We wanted it to be, again, as accurate as possible for today so that a coach, if they were to ever see a kid CSE player report and it had a D2 level on it, they know, okay, this is a D2 player that I know I could recruit tomorrow and they could play on my roster and they would be a fit, right? So that's why we decided to do that methodology as opposed to a projection.
Yep, that makes a whole lot of sense. And so what can the player expect in terms of how they receive the CSE slider in their CSE report after taking one of our evaluations?
Yeah, so they will get a overall CSE score, which is going to be their, again, overall score for all the different pillars that we have at an evaluation. It sums all of those up and basically gives them their final fit. But within a full evaluation, a full CSE, we evaluate players on 6 different pillars. So for a position player, those 6 pillars are defense, hitting for power, hitting for contact, there's mental, there's foot speed, and then there's arm speed. So the player would actually get a slider score on each 6 of those pillars because we all know player is not going to be the same level across the board in all of those categories, right? Maybe they are an excellent power hitter and they might score mid-major D1 for their power hitting scores, but then foot speed, maybe it's not quite the same. And so maybe they would score, let's say, a JUCO 2 for foot speed, right? And so they get scored in all these different pillars, up and down, and then the overall score is the compilation of all of those things, right? And so again, it's really important to break it out by pillar so that a player can see, again, from a developmental standpoint, which areas of their game they might need to work on the most in order to achieve the level of success that they want. It's also important to notate that we break all this down by position. So we're not going to be comparing, let's say, the foot speed of a center fielder to the foot speed of a first baseman, right? In general, we can probably assume that the outfielder is going to be quicker than the first baseman, and so it wouldn't make sense to compare those two. So we always look at it per position. So that's why it's really important. We always get the kid's primary position when they take a full CSE so that we can only group those by position and make those accurate comparisons.
That's a pretty good spread of deliverables. And when an athlete receives this breakdown, how is it meant to empower them to continue their quest towards playing in college from where they're at now to what they can do to earn a spot on a roster?
Yeah, absolutely. So every kid coming in and playing ball has a dream of some kind, right? So if a kid, attends a full CSE and their final score doesn't match, what their dream truly is, then at this point they can understand why. And so there's a lot of developmental pieces that go into the report for a full CSE, but they can see the gap and see, okay, if I wanted to be, let's say, mid-major D1, but right now I'm scoring at a D2 level, which areas of my game do I need the most work on? And so maybe they can see just within the pillars themselves which areas they should focus on. But then the college coach evaluators that are looking at these kids on the field give them direct feedback as well. And they tell them the most important thing that they need to work on in each of these categories. It's a direct question that we ask the coaches. So they get all this information, and at that point, right, then it's up to the kid. Do they want to continue to work hard to achieve their goal, whatever their dream might be? So
awesome. Well, that's great takeaway during the evaluation, what they're receiving and after the deliverable is really great. So thanks for breaking down the slider for us today.
Sure.
And if there's any players out there that want more information on the slider or just want to really experience it firsthand, take a look at our schedule that is going to be launching for 2022. We have a lot of fun evaluations that are going to be offered next year. So thanks for taking the time, Mo. We look forward to next time.
No problem. Thank you, Jesse.